Things are changing at a dramatic rate, not just the Bush to Obama transition, but lots and lots of changes within aspects of government. I mean, literally night and day changes between President Bush and President Obama. One is that science is now back on the national agenda. I don't mean that just a little bit. Science is back on the agenda in a way it hasn't been since the response to Sputnik. And many people, my generation and older, who got into science specifically cite the US response to the Soviet launch of the Sputnik satellite and its US response where science and engineering got investigated. Again, it was a huge growth in interest. There was discussions about interdisciplinary topics. There was a need to do basic science. And over again, President Obama has said that science is back as a critical tool. Not for always deciding things, but for figuring out what the options are. And that's not a small statement. I mean, it really changes the tenor of government when science and technology are thought of as allies. And many of you have seen some of the attacks on President Bush for having been anti-science. And it's not just ideology, Democrat, Republican. There were real clear measures of when science was not being respected, when scientific views were being ignored. The most famous case I'll talk about in a few minutes, perhaps, is the degree to which the Bush administration's EPA administrator specifically went against the ruling of his own science advisors to rule against California on greenhouse gas emissions from vehicles. And that is the single biggest change, arguably. That's a change that happened Friday. So new EPA Administrator Lisa Johnson got up there and said, no, this is not how we're going to do things. There was a very dramatic turnaround. Essentially, what happened is President Bush had issued through his EPA Administrator a statement that we would not give California a waiver to go for better air quality laws than the federal laws. And there's a long story about why that happened. And this was the first time California's request to set a higher standard had been denied in 61 straight requests going back 2 decades. So there was no precedent to deny this California desire to set a higher standard. President Bush essentially denied that. Congressman Henry Waxman essentially led an inquiry into this process in terms of what the EPA administrator knew and didn't know, what Bush knew or didn't know. Most of us think Bush didn't know much, but on this issue, he knew less than other times. And the reversal on Friday is a total change. What it says is that CO2, greenhouse gases in general, but carbon dioxide in particular, are identified as a harmful greenhouse gas, and that US regulation has to reflect that. So we'll come back to that in a little bit. But this is the key climate example of this huge change. And the other point that I just sort of mentioned is this number 2, that climate policy and energy policy are directly and fundamentally linked, and that there's going to be a new day for turning research into action.